client's ability to pay is always taken into consideration, and I can tell you there's clients that have moved off to community services that have no means of repaying the loan, and they're put at a zero balance, or they're a zero monthly payment, because we know they can't pay anything. But they have to be in contact with their caseworker if they're with community services, or the collection officer if they're with Service Nova Scotia Municipal Relations, and they have to give them that information that would allow them to make that decision. So what I would say to anybody that's having difficulty meeting their monthly loan payments is get in touch with whoever's managing your account, give them your circumstances, explain why whatever amount that has been assigned to you is difficult in the circumstances. And Mr. Chair, perhaps I could continue the answer after the hour of interruption.
Yes, we've reached the hour of interruption, and we'll recess the committee till 6:30.
Thank you. We reach a moment of interruption. Recognize the honourable member for Kings West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Certainly pleased today to be able to speak to this resolution. A resolution, of course, that grew out of the debate, the discussion, the wonderment as to where the 26 delisted sites would actually go. However, this topic does lend itself, as we know, to the much bigger question of protection of our natural resources, which I feel and party feels we need a very proactive position on. The delisting certainly provided an opportunity for both opposition parties to work in concert to try to bring about a resolve that would be in the agreement of those groups of people who found the delisting certainly to be very untimely and to certainly pose a number of problems for naturalists, conservation groups, and just people who like to get out to certainly some of those areas and not necessarily all of them. Also, it was a time for the minister, I know, to hear from Nova Scotians. Many Nova Scotians addressed this issue by way of email, letters, submissions, and of course, finally, having some people come here to the legislature to present very strong opposition to what was taking place. And I must say, I do thank the minister for listening to Nova Scotians and the groups that were represented here at the legislature, and to take a position whereby now these sites, the 13 wildlife game sanctuaries and the 13 wildlife management areas, in fact, have now been moved off that list. The approach that I certainly feel, and again, it's one that we've started to talk about in our party, and a number of these certainly have the characteristics to perhaps move forward to protected spaces. And again, that ties in very, very well with a piece of legislation that is in progress through the legislature, brought in by the Minister of Environment, to make it much more feasible for additional protected spaces to come under that legislation for Nova Scotians and for the future protection of lands that will become available. I do want to draw for a moment. I know my colleague from Kings North doesn't always like me drawing upon history because he usually has a rebuttal, but certainly a former Minister of Natural Resources, Don Down, did have a very, very proactive approach to this area and brought 31 protected spaces. And in fact, I would see that as certainly a very, very fine achievement. One of the very, very interesting, I guess, pieces of information that I researched and discovered during this process of looking at the delisted sites is that in Nova Scotia, we have what can be called 80 natural regions, 80 areas of ecological significance. And currently, only 23 of those areas have any kind of protected land and space, whether it be by a national park, a provincial park, nature reserves, or now, of course, through these sanctuaries and wildlife management areas. So we still have a long ways to go, in other words, is what I'm really saying. If we start to look at a lot of the unique areas that Nova Scotia has to offer, and I know there are many members of this House who have, in fact, traveled either for canoe trips, camping trips, hiking, wilderness outings, perhaps especially, I know perhaps a number of us being involved with Boy Scouts or the Scouting movement through the years, discovered some of the wilderness of Nova Scotia. And we truly have a heritage that, in my view, must be protected. So we still have a lot of unique areas that have no attachment to an absolute mechanism to protect those for the future. So which brings up certainly just having 11 nature reserves. It is my hope now to be able to see some of the sanctuaries. There are certainly some of the game sanctuaries and some of the wildlife management areas that I feel very strongly about having to move to that kind of new status. Not all of them, and certainly it was fine for the Department of Natural Resources to have a review of some of these sites. So hopefully some can be put into that category and into that classification. A couple of areas that I do want to draw attention to today that I believe is a weak link in the protection of natural resources, because certainly I think our ocean playground, as we often call our seacoast, is indeed a great resource. It's a resource, of course, linked primarily through tourism. And the fact that we just have 10% of our coastline that is in the public domain, in public ownership, through Crown land, public beaches, and so forth. And I know when there is intrusion into some of those areas, we really do hear about what Nova Scotians really deep down believe in. And when the Digby Neck area came up for discussion through a quarry proposal, we found out what Nova Scotians really want as part of their future. When we talk about some of the coastal area around the Northwest Arm, just today in the House, when that whole area of the Northwest Arm comes up for any kind of change in the natural area that is there, we certainly hear an outcry. Sperry Beach in the district of Barrington is another area that again, is it Lunenburg? Oh, sorry about that. Okay, I'll have to check my resource on that one. Thank you very much. Okay, the resource I looked up actually said I appreciate that correction, and certainly is another area, and beaches generally, because we have a number of our beaches that in fact harbor endangered species, and so we certainly need to keep those for nature lovers and for those that in fact are true naturalists and want to see some of these endangered species protected. So to that effect, there is a group now that has been organized in Nova Scotia called the Coastal Coalition of Nova Scotia, and they are starting to try and fast-track a coastal zone management plan that will, I believe, be a very, very strong and positive initiative for our province. And the other area, and I know we sometimes deal with this, whether it's through the practices in our forests. But we know our forests are a very, very important resource for the province, but we also know that they are under enormous pressure. And it is one of the areas that I believe the words conservation and sustainability must move forward with economic development, because we're starting to see an enormous stress on the woodlands of this province. And I want to finish off my allotted time with acknowledging the work of two groups that I'm familiar with. One is the Clean Annapolis River Project, which I think has done enormous work with conservation throughout the Annapolis Valley. And the other one is the Ecology Action Center, that in the classroom I use some of their resources, and I know the kind of message they bring to Nova Scotians through their work. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Recognize the Honourable Minister of Natural Resources.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Indeed, I am pleased to stand in my place today to speak about Nova Scotia's natural resources and my department's work in promoting and managing our natural resources in our province. And our mandate, Mr. Speaker, is to build a better future for Nova Scotians through responsible management of our natural resources. And we're committed to stewardship and sustainable management of our natural resources and Crown lands. And Mr. Speaker, we take pride in doing our job for all Nova Scotians and for visitors that enter our great province. And in saying that, I must go to some of the remarks from the member opposite onto the 26 sites for the sanctuaries and the protected wilderness areas. Mr. Speaker, those sanctuaries are secure and safe, and I have made that commitment to all Nova Scotians, and they will be. But Mr. Speaker, we wanted to consult with Nova Scotians. We wanted Nova Scotians to respond to my department, and we have had an overwhelming response from citizens from all across this province, how important the protected lands are in this province. And Mr. Speaker, out of the land mass in this province, we have approximately 13 million acres of land. 3.5 million acres of that is Crown land. Mr. Speaker, 20% of that land mass is now under protection by this government and governments in the past, I must add. We take our job and our responsibility very seriously, Mr. Speaker. And we're looking at 9 additional sites, Mr. Speaker. And the member opposite, he spoke about the Coastal Coalition Group. Yes, Mr. Speaker, we have lots and numerous groups across Nova Scotia, and I must say that I have met with that group, and I am very, very, it was music to my ears to hear what they're trying to do in their province. And my department is working with that group, Mr. Speaker. We're working with the Kingsburg Beach Group. We're working with the Sperry's Group, Beach Group. All the beaches. And you heard the member from Cape Breton speaking the other day about Dominion Beach. Mr. Speaker, those are treasures of our great province, and we must protect them and enhance them in every way we can. And if we have to partner with municipalities, if we have to partner with groups and community groups, I think that that's what government's all about, is listening and understanding the needs in communities and working with the groups. Mr. Speaker, and I may add that even the beautiful Yarmouth has beautiful beaches. Our Port Maitland Beach, I'm very proud of our beach, Port Maitland Beach is one, for example. We have numerous beaches in my community, but Port Maitland is a provincial park, and we're very proud of our beach and down our way. But Mr. Speaker, just last year alone, my department has worked with other groups, and the Crown has acquired some beautiful pieces of property for all Nova Scotians for years to come, Mr. Speaker. And we acquired the lands at Port Bickerton and Sykes Island, adding approximately 1,200 acres of coastal land base to our land mass under the Crown jurisdiction. Mr. Speaker, and we partnered last year with Ducks Unlimited and the Eastern Habitat Joint Ventures, and for about 2,000 hectares of wetlands that is now protected. That's by partnering. And I believe that's how we have to look at today and in the future. We must continue partnering with all levels of government, federal, provincial, and local governments and community groups. I believe that is the answer, and we are working with the Nova Scotia Nature Trust, Mr. Speaker, as I made the announcement here approximately a month ago with the Nova Scotia Nature Trust, partnering with them. We gave them $300,000 over a number of years, and they are going to, in return, give to the Crown land mass and up to the value or maybe even exceeding that value. In our renewable resource, Mr. Speaker, we must work with our woodlot owners. 75% of the land mass in our province, Mr. Speaker, is owned by private woodlot owners. And we are working with those, and we are managing in conjunction with the private woodlot owners, and we're working with the industry, Mr. Speaker, to make a smaller footprint by doing good management practices of our forest. We are having a smaller footprint that is being cut, Mr. Speaker, and we're working with the groups, sustainable forest groups, to have silviculture for years to come and for generations to come. We must protect our forest. We must protect all of our interest here in our natural resource in our province. You know, like we must educate people in the hurricane zone onto fire protection of their lands and their homes and their real estate. And we are doing that by going out, doing advertisements, doing brochures and flyers, and letting people know of the awareness, Mr. Speaker. The fire season is upon us, and it's we are working with all these communities to make sure that they're aware. Absolutely, that's right, Mr. Speaker. We are working with all groups. We are working with the environmentalist groups, we're working with industry, we're working with private landowners, and we're showing that by doing the proper management on Crown lands, Mr. Speaker. And we will even enhance that more. We are coming out, my department has announced, we are doing new strategies, reviewing our strategies, our forest strategies, our park strategies, our mineral strategies, Mr. Speaker, and that's where the general public can have more input into my department and bring their views into our department so we can understand more of the needs and the wants of Nova Scotians to enhance our resource for years to come. In our parks, Mr. Speaker, we have a number of parks and across our province, and I know my colleague wants to share my time with me, so I'll be very brief. Like in the last year, we worked with the community at Rizzers Beach. We announced last spring that we would reopen the boardwalk. That's a very important segment to the park at Rizzers Beach. We worked with the community. We opened the park, the boardwalk, and we told them that we would be back to put a brand new boardwalk. Mr. Speaker, we did put a brand new boardwalk, and it's up for all the guests that visit our park at Rizzers Beach. That beautiful new boardwalk is open for this year's season. The Hurricane One, yes, it is accessible. Yes, Mr. Speaker, it is. And it has safety rails on it for people using the park. Mr. Speaker, Porter's Lake was devastated by Hurricane Juan last year. Devastated. The park was wiped out totally. My department had worked very hard with the federal government to get assistance through the disaster relief, and that took months and months of negotiation. But, Mr. Speaker, we are spending approximately $1.5 million onto that park, and that will be the state-of-the-art park when that's open. And I committed to all members of this House and to all Nova Scotians that that park will be open this year, and that park will be open this year, Mr. Speaker. But it's working with the community and working with their contractors and making sure we get what the community needs, Mr. Speaker. And I could go on with our wildlife and our forest protection, Mr. Speaker, our renewable resources, but I know my good colleague would like to have a minute to finish off. And thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Recognize all member for Kings North. You have about a minute and a half.
Thank you very much. I'll talk very quickly. I was just inspired by the member's resolution and his comments about Don Down, former member of this House, because Don told me that he had a helicopter all booked, ready to take the Premier in to to announce that Cape Split was going to move into the public's hands, and it never happened. And Mr. Speaker, I'm very, very proud of the fact that our government was the one that made Cape Split protected land for the public to use, so I think that that's something that we should take great pride in, and I personally take great pride in it, and I thank the government for having supported me. So Cape Split can be enjoyed for generations to come for the residents of Nova Scotia and visitors from afar. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Recognized all member for Hants East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I very pleased to get up and stand in my place and speak to this resolution. There is some great deal of sense in supporting this resolution. My impression of the honourable member from Kings West who proposed this resolution my impression is that he's referring to the natural places, forest and so on. He wasn't referring to oil and gas and minerals, etc. So that's I think that's the intent of his resolution, and that's the direction I'll go. When we talk about the forest resource, Mr. Speaker, I think the Department of Natural Resources looks at it in two ways, and perhaps a variety of ways, and the minister can nod or applaud as I speak for where I am and his way of thinking. But I think the department looks at the province in terms of the total forest. And the total forest in this province, Mr. Speaker, is 4,218,000 hectares, and small private ownership of that is about 1,992,800,000. Industrial is 908,000. Provincial Crown is 1,204,200,000, and Federal Crown 113,000. Now, roughly, and I think the minister is pretty close on this, but for small private, you're looking at close to 50% of the land mass in the province. Industrial is just about a quarter. Provincial Crown is about a quarter, and federal is considerably less. If you deduct, Mr. Speaker, some of those, some areas that are protected and so on, but if we deduct the federal lands, parks and protected areas, non-participating small landowners, wildlife habitat and biodiversity, areas that are inaccessible, non or low productivity areas, and non-forestry areas, and this would include, this include Christmas trees, etc. Then you subtract about 1,600,000 hectares from that 4,218,000. So you're left with a forest of about 2,616,000 hectares, or approximately 6 million acres. Now that actually, in this province, is the forest we harvest on. That's what the industry tends to look at as the area that they can actually extract wood fiber and hopefully create value and jobs, etc. Now, I am aware of the 9 proposed areas to be protected, or proposed wildlife management areas, and I want to say that it's not clear yet. It's not clear to me, unless I missed something. But and I would say that's so seldom happens. I can't believe that I could. But that the sanctuaries and wildlife management areas and the proposed wildlife management areas, it's not clear to me exactly what level of protection they have. It doesn't appear to me that they have any great amount of protection. It's my understanding there's actually been some clear cutting occur on some of these areas. So when that's happening, then you have to question, gee, what level of protection do they get? And I've thrown this number out to the minister before, that the national target for protected spaces, and I mean actually, protected or nature preserves, which have a significant level of protection. The activities are quite controlled as to what you can do in those areas. Is about 8%. The national average is 12%. That's the target, I should say. And in this province, we have approximately 8%. So we do have some distance to go, Mr. Speaker. And I think there's very real reason to be concerned, Mr. Speaker, in this regard. And the reason for that is the level of harvest in this province. We harvest about 100,000 acres a year in the forest sector. 97+% of that is in clear cutting. Since this government came into power in 1999, they have doubled the number of species on the endangered or vulnerable or threatened species list. And that, Mr. Speaker, in large part is due to our harvesting practices. Now, it would seem to me that even if we were to talk about our sanctuaries and our wilderness areas, and it's not clear to me that these areas are exempt or are not going to wind up as being harvested, that if we were to move in the direction of selection harvesting, that we could certainly minimize the impacts on these species on our woodlands across the province, everywhere, so that we actually would be protecting lands in a much greater way and ensuring habitat for species all across the province, Mr. Speaker. And I'm really more concerned that the province doesn't seem willing to go down this road, and actually that the industry is not. And I think a year or so ago I crunched some numbers that at our present rate of harvest in this province, if Europeans bumped into Nova Scotia today, Mr. Speaker, and they started harvesting at the rate that we harvest now, that they could harvest what we call the operable forest, which is the 6 million acres. They could harvest that in 60 years. Now, Mr. Speaker, that is a ridiculously short amount of time, and we know that the operable forest is basically harvested. In other words, the biggest part of this forest has already been harvested, and we have almost, I think it's less than 1% of the operable forest is 100 years or older. There's less than 3% that is 80 to 100. I think that's 32% is 60 to 80 years of age, and then 36% is 40 to 60. Now, that 32%, which is 60 to 80 years of age, we can cut that in 19 years at our present rate of harvest, and we've actually been doing that cutting since 1996, when the department came out with its harvesting forecast. It was a document towards sustainability, 1996 to 2070, Mr. Speaker. And we actually were almost in 10 years into that harvest. And I would say that if you could take that age group of 60 to 80 years in one block, and the minister and I both know that's not really possible, that doesn't arrive in one segment of the forest, but that age group basically could be harvested in 19 years. And this is the difficulty that I have. I mean, we're not taking, other than James River, Egg Mountain, that area, and I applaud the government for what they've done in setting that aside and actually giving it true protection. Long Lake down on the eastern shore is another area that the community there is very concerned about getting it protected. But I'm also concerned about the impacts of our harvesting policies, and I see if the government could really actually do the most by changing our harvesting practices, Mr. Speaker, so that they would be, number one, far more sustainable, and allow for a much older forest. And at some point, and this is something, if the minister will say it in this House, I'd be surprised, but because you can't get anybody in the department to say it. But that is in terms of an annual allowable cut, that they'll actually put a limit on the amount that's cut, and that has not happened, Mr. Speaker. Now, I heard people kind of hint to it on Crown land, but certainly not across the province, and I've never heard it nailed down on Crown land, because it seemed to me that for a piece of land, which Nova Scotia is, that's almost an island, it's pretty easy to determine how many trees you have, and if you wanted to do it in terms of the codfish, Mr. Speaker, we can see these codfish sticking out of the ground, and we can determine at our level of harvest how long it will last. So I would like to see much greater protection for those areas that the member from Kings West referred to, plus better harvesting strategy. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much. The House will now resolve itself back into the Committee on the whole House on Estimates. Thank you. Sure.
I'm advised that the Minister of Community Services was in the middle of a response and wishes to complete that response.
Yes, thank you,
The Honourable
Mr. Chair.
Minister.
It's
Could I ask that the Minister of Community Services complete the response that he had to that earlier question in his response to the next question that's coming from the Honourable Member from Halifax Needham. The Honourable Member from Halifax Needham.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I want to thank the Chair because I have very little time. I'm sharing it with my colleagues, and the matters I want to bring forward are very pressing in my constituency. As the Chair will know, I represent the constituency of Halifax Needham, the northern part of the peninsula, and my constituency is within the central region of the Minister's Department. And I want to raise some concerns about the direction of the central region. The central region has a relatively new manager with respect to his longevity in the job. And the direction this region has been going in causes me concern based on what people tell me. People who work inside the department, people who deal with the department frequently and regularly from the nonprofit sector, and people in the field of social work practice, my profession prior to coming to this place. The concerns that are being expressed to me, I think, are important for the minister to hear, because there are concerns from people who have invested a great deal of time in their professional training as social workers, who are telling me they can't practice social work as they were taught because this department and this region increasingly is fixated and preoccupied with cost-cutting considerations and the reduction in services. In this House, I have raised various issues, and I'll just summarize some of them. I've raised issues around the cuts in comfort allowances, the personal use allowances for people who are in shelters. I have raised issues and have written the minister with respect to the termination of adolescents in care when they turn 16, if they have any problems whatsoever at all, without any transitioning into any other program, leaving them vulnerable in our community, and sometimes leaving the community vulnerable with respect to the difficulties that young people without supervision and a family can present in the community. I am being told that there is a review underway for people who are in receipt of income support, a review that is looking at their telephone benefits and bus passes, and that even people with extensive and permanent disabilities are being subjected to this review. And it has raised a fair degree of anxiety in that group of people with respect to whether or not they're going to be able to maintain their telephone services and their bus passes. I continually encounter situations in my own constituency where people have been inappropriately housed in senior citizens' public housing without the necessary supports and services that they require. So these are concerns that I encounter on a routine basis. As an MLA, I'm increasingly seeing situations where people who are in need of special needs, what historically have been special needs, as they are in receipt of assistance, eyeglasses, dental care, particular crises that occur when they go to their community services worker and say, I really need these things, if they are assisted, increasingly, many of the things that were once seen as special needs are now being recovered as overpayments from them. To get access to the appeal process is extraordinarily difficult. The waiting time to get a scheduled formal appeal is at least 4 weeks. That's a minimum, probably more like 6 weeks. And when the decisions come, the decisions can be quite disgraceful. They are decisions that are written for the hometown team without any factual findings of fact. And anybody who has ever been before a tribunal will know that you really need to have at least some finding of fact in a case so that you can determine on what the basis was on which the adjudicator made a decision. So I have to say, as someone who has practiced in the field of social work for many years and who now represents a constituency where many people are, through no choice of their own, in a position where they rely on this minister's department, I see an enormous erosion in not just the services that are available to people, but as well in the goodwill, the respect, and the compassion with which people are treated. And indeed, in some cases, the professional values and ethics of a social work practice. My colleague, the member from Cape Breton Centre earlier today, made reference to his view that increasingly within the Department of Community Services, those with social work training and experience and expertise are being replaced by financial planners, managers, and what have you. And I must say, to some extent, well, perhaps that's not shared by the minister's staff, but it's certainly a perception that's not only a perception of members of this House, but it's a perception of various groups, including the membership of the Nova Scotia Association of Social Workers. Mr. Chair, I was in this province during the Savage years when we experienced deep cuts in many departments. And I can tell you that one of the things that is said in the social work profession today is often that the Department of Community Services, during the darkest period of cuts in this province, escaped cuts. And they did that for 3 reasons, Mr. Chair, according to people who have looked at this and analyzed why that was. They escaped cuts because they had a strong deputy minister, because they had a compassionate minister who got it, and they had a premier who also got it and understood the importance of having strong programs for people who are disadvantaged. So I really wanted to outline some of the concerns that are brought to me. I have a question for the minister about, well, really I have two questions, and I don't really expect a response from the minister with respect to the earlier comments I have made. Those are views that I express here on my own behalf and on behalf of people who are dependent in one way or another on the minister's department and on the government, and who feel threatened to some extent from voicing those remarks directly themselves, because their livelihood in one way or another depends on their relationship with the department. But it causes me great frustration when I encounter people, and I have to say to the minister that these aren't isolated comments and situations. These comments that come to me and situations that are presented are so broadly based that I cannot be left with anything other than the impression that there is a general problem and a building problem throughout the helping professions, agencies, and client groups and communities, certainly within the arena that I have contact with in the north end of Halifax and throughout Halifax-Dartmouth, frankly. So, but specifically, I want to ask the minister about two particular organizations or issues that I would like to get some answers around. The first is with respect to two daycare centers in Halifax Needham, one the North End Daycare and the other the Alexandra Center. Both of these daycares are very old, long-standing daycares. They're among the first daycares in the province. They have all of the daycare spaces at both North End Daycare and Alexandra Center are subsidized daycare spaces that's licensed as a fully subsidized daycare. And what this means is the families who rely on those daycares are families who come from low-income socioeconomic backgrounds. They're either people who are in training, people who are in receipt of income support, people who are working but working at low income. These daycares are both financially strapped. The North End Daycare, the minister will be aware, is carrying a very serious deficit and requires support from the department. The Alexander Center has moved from pillar to post and is attempting to find a permanent home and has a very good plan, but has not been able to get any support from the minister's department. And so I want to ask the minister, what support is his department going to provide these daycares so that they can become stable and focus on what it is that they need to be focusing on, which is early childhood education, and when will this occur? So this is my first question to the minister. My second question to the minister is with respect to the SASH project, which is a project for supportive assisted housing that has been submitted to his department from the Metro Nonprofit Housing Association. The minister will recall that he and I have exchanged correspondence with respect to that housing project. This is a sensible proposal and one that is extraordinarily important because of the growing number of men and women in our community who have mental health disorders and also addictions, and their real need to live in in an environment that is both supportive, that is healthy, and to get people out of the derelict rooming houses and away from slum landlords into an environment where they will have the support and the respect that they need in order to lead a dignified life. So those are the two questions I have for the minister with respect to the North End Daycare, Alexander Centre, and the SASH project.
Thank you, Member. The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I will answer the honourable member's questions, but there's a number of things that I feel compelled to do as minister before I do that, and she may not have invited me to respond to her preamble, but unfortunately, sometimes in the debate here in the House, we forget that there are civil servants out there that are not able to defend themselves. And I want to put on the record, number one, the confidence that I have in my staff. I want to acknowledge specifically the comments from the Liberal Party about the great working relationship that they have with the staff in their areas, and I acknowledge that immediately. I want to say that I think that some of the tactics by the official opposition today have been regrettable, going from substance to personal, and I'm going to respond to the comments by the member from Halifax Needham that personally attacked my staff publicly, where they are in no position to be here to defend themselves, and I would suggest that that sort of practice should not happen in the legislature, and I would further suggest that if you have those sorts of concerns and you really want to deal with them constructively, that you ought to bring it to me instead of some public forum. The first comment that the member from Halifax Needham made was about our new regional administrator in the Central Region. She singled him out and for criticism.
Order. The Honourable Member for Halifax Needham on a point of order.
On a point of order, Mr. Chair, I'd like the record to reflect what actually was said when I asked my questions. My questions were directed to the minister. They were with respect to concerns that have been brought to me with respect to the preoccupation of the Central Region with cost-cutting measures, of which I outlined probably 5 or 6 substantive, factual points to support the concerns that have been raised. Nobody is attacking the minister's staff, but Mr. Speaker, I make no apologies for pointing out to the minister that it's his responsibility and his failings that are being spoken about here tonight.
Thank you, Member. I'm at a slight disadvantage because I was not here when the comments were made, but I will now recognize the member, the honourable, and I ask for order in the House as I recognize the minister responsible.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, and I think Hansard will accurately record the actual comments of the minister or the member from Halifax Needham, including the one about questioning the professional ethics of the Central Region social workers, which was not called for and not appropriate.
Point of order. I'll recognize the honourable member for Halifax Needham.
Mr. Chair, on a point of order, once again, what I said, and I want the record to be accurate on this, is that people who are professionally trained social workers are expressing concerns that they are unable to practice within their code of ethics and to offer a professional practice because of the preoccupation of the minister's department with financial concerns and not human concerns, Mr. Chair. That is what I said.
It's not a point of order without substantive proof of this, and I'll recognize the Minister of Community Services.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll refer to Hansard from the member's opening comments and rest my case. the honourable member is claiming a preoccupation in the reduction of services, and I don't have any problems with that sort of comment because I'm quite happy to stand up and speak to them. She made mention of cuts to comfort allowances, and I would point out, Mr. Chair, that the comfort allowances last year went to $105 from $95 in the central region, and on January the 1st of 2006 they will go to $115. She made reference to cutbacks within the central region, and specifically I'm going to refer to special needs because that is the catch-all, Mr. Chair, when caseworkers need discretion to help out a client in need. They can refer to special needs, and it allows them some latitude to address their concerns. I would point out, Mr. Chair, that special needs in the central region were about approximately $13 million last year, and I understand that's an increase of somewhere in the vicinity of $5 million. So I guess that the evidence that I have in front of me would tend to contradict the suggestion by the member from Halifax Needham. I would also like to point out that the basic personal allowance, which was an initiative of this government to increase after many years of it being frozen, went from $180 last year to $184. It's now going to $190. And partly in response to concern expressed by members in this House during the estimates last year, I followed through on my commitment to increase the shelter allowance for a single non-elderly people. The boarding room rate went from $197 to $222, and the apartment rate went from $235 to $285. Not as much as I would like to have done, but I would think that anybody would suggest that that is significant. So I just wanted to put some perspective as to what's actually happening within the department, and I wanted to defend the record of my staff in particular. There was also reference to the preoccupation on finances, and the member from Dartmouth North made some comments about performance bonuses, and I think this plays into what the member from Halifax Needham was concerned about. And I would have to say that based on the suggestions from the member from Dartmouth North, that he found that somehow or other it was not appropriate for the Deputy Minister of Community Services to be on pay for performance, but that perhaps it was okay for all the other Deputy Ministers. And he's agreeing with me. And I guess that my concern is that I would want to have the best people working in the Department of Community Services, the most competent, caring staff possible, and especially in managers. And in order to do that and attract those sort of people, you have to be competitive, and I'm very pleased with not only my Deputy Minister, but I'm very pleased with the way that she is able to attract excellent staff to her, including the regional administrator for the Central Region, who came from Service Nova Scotia and Municipal Relations, and has done such a wonderful job in working with the various organizations in the North End in particular. He has been the point person in dealing with the whole emergency shelter situation. He's got an excellent rapport that he's built up with the 6 shelters. They meet on a monthly basis, and this is something that is very important to me, and it's very important, I think, to all Nova Scotians that be in place for people when they are without accommodation, that there is a safe place for them to go and to get shelter and a warm bed. So I would say that the regional administrator has done an exemplary job in this area, and he has also tracked the use that's being made of the facilities there and kept us informed of them, and has created a network between the 6 emergency shelters, and so that they are dialoguing amongst themselves much better and doing referrals. And as a result of that, we made significant additional investments in that area. But the member asked some specific questions. I know I've just got a few minutes left, and I do want to respond to her questions. The North End Daycare, just to put this in perspective, as I did for the member from Glace Bay, these are large child care centers. In 2003-2004, they received $528,320 from the Department of Community Services to assist them in their operation, and the Alexandra Children's Center in the same year got $491,263 from the department. These centers do have that in common with town daycare in Sydney, and that it is an area that very much needs subsidized daycare spaces. I am certainly aware of the challenges of the Alexandra Children's Center, and I understand that they have applied under the expansion and startup grant, and they are an organization that I definitely want to be able to assist. I want to see them to be able to continue. With regards to the North End daycare, I'm advised that there's some challenges perhaps regarding vacancies for that particular center, and that is a concern to me. With regards to SASH, I would like to acknowledge that the member wrote me a rather thoughtful letter, basically outlining the challenges faced by mental health consumers that are in need of accommodation, and that it's not just enough to put a roof over their head. They need the support services that are necessary to basically stabilize their situation and allow them to manage. And with that regard, the proposal that was put forward was judged by the Department of Health and the Department of Community Services not to be sustainable. But I did make the commitment to them, and I made the commitment to the member, I believe, in the letter that I sent back, that I do want to continue working with them until we get something that is sustainable and can assist those people that would be served by this. One has to remember that the whole SASH model is based on experiences in New York and London and much larger centers, and it may not necessarily fit with what's going on in Halifax. Are we done? Anyway, I will continue to work with those people and that have brought this forward. The regional administrator is in contact with them. I met with the proponents. We had a very productive meeting, and I am pleased with the feedback, and I intend to follow this through until we have the appropriate services in place to care for those people. So, Mr. Chair, I would suggest that with those few comments, that we will be there for them.
Thank you, Minister. There's about 10 seconds left, and I'll recognize the honourable member for Halifax Fairview.
Thank you. My question to the Minister, in the last 10 years, how many children in the care of the Minister or an agency have
The time
died?
has expired for the NDP caucus. The time has expired for the day. I'll recognize the Honourable Government House Leader.
You now rise and report considerable progress. Sure.
Chairman of the Committee of the Whole House on Supply Reports.
The committee has met and has made considerable progress and begs leave to sit again.
Agreed. The Honourable Government House Leader on government business.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, would you please call the order of business public bills for second reading?
Public bills for second reading.
Would you please call Bill number 177?
Bill number
Financial
177, the
Measures
Honourable
Act.
Member for Victoria Lakes. You have approximately 40 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
40 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, I just heard the Honourable Member say that we have made considerable progress, and I'm hoping that I will be able to agree with that after the road plan that has been set forth in this budget. Mr. Speaker, I must begin by quoting a lady, Wendy Beasley from Halifax, in Saturday's edition of the Herald, May the 7th. And the popular advertising for tires are your tires ready for the road? And Mr. Speaker, I'd like to respond with what she says in there, are the roads ready for your tires? And Mr. Speaker, I've spoken numerous occasions about the conditions of roads, and I just couldn't help but quote Wendy Beasley on that because it's typical, just the way that it works out, that a lot of the roads aren't ready for the tires, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, earlier today I mentioned Danny Eller, who has 11 employees in the Waikagama area in his service station, and actually closed his service station last week and then turned to work and at the request of his 11 employees, Mr. Speaker, agreed to open it until after school has come out for the summer. And Mr. Speaker, I also must reiterate the fact that David McRae in Badek is planning on closing his service station if he can't get a decision on the prices for gas or fuel or make a better profit. He's been in business for 30-some years, and he was telling me that, Gerald, if we don't get a decision soon, that he'll have to get out of the gas business altogether. Mr. Speaker, the reason I mention these two is because I'm under the understanding from Mr. Eller's information that truckers go into his garage and tell him that diesel fuel is 75 cents a litre in Ontario. It's 95 cents a litre in his station. But Mr. Speaker, my good friend down in Bay St. Lawrence, Robert McClellan, is paying $1.18 a litre for diesel fuel to go fishing his lobster and crab. And that, Mr. Speaker, is putting a tremendous stress on any business person to have to come up with $1.18 a litre and trying to make yourself a profit. Coupled with that, Mr. Speaker, the price of the crab that he is selling now has dropped down to $2 a pound, and that's very low for that. Mr. Speaker, I also cited the fact about volunteers. And what I would like to do, Mr. Speaker, is when I mentioned volunteers earlier this afternoon, I'd like to mention a few of them and I see the Honourable Minister of Tourism's picture there with Donald Beaton, and also in the picture is the Honourable Myra Freeman, the Honourable Lieutenant Governor. But Donald J. Beaton, Little Narrows, Mr. Speaker, Samantha McKinnon, Washabuck Community Centre, Lonnie Dow, Middle River Highland Senior Club, Danny McNeil, a very good friend of mine, and an excellent councillor representing the Highland Village. Valerie Patterson from Ross Ferry, the wife of the present councillor down there who replaced me, and Fraser Patterson is doing a very good job. Levine Barlow McRae, South Haven Community Hall, and Dan McNeil again from North Highlands Nordic Ski. Marion Thompson, St. Anne's Bay Health Centre. Ms. Andrea McCachran, Badek and Area Minor Hockey. Mr. Donald Jardine, Cape Breton Four Seasons Project, that's down north of Smoky, Mr. Speaker. Lorna Tompkins, North Shore Learning Centre and Enterprise Society. Gus McClellan, Washabuck Community Centre. Gerard McNeil, Iona Community Access Society, superman when it comes to computers and promoting IT in Victoria County. Millie Campbell, Big Berdor, we all call her Aunt Millie, from the Big Berdor Fire Ladies Auxiliary. Gavina McKenzie, I put a resolution through for her just yesterday, Mr. Speaker, representing the Ladies Auxiliary of the Big Berdor Fire Hall. Gary Stockley, Inganisha, volunteer with the fire department, and you've heard me mention fire departments. Greg McNeil, Iona Volunteer Fire Department. Mr. Speaker, you can go on, and then after that there's 21 organizations, all volunteer organizations that have volunteers with them. But the reason it relates to the Financial Measures Act is, as I said earlier today, if a person were to put just a minimum wage of a price on 1 hour of volunteering, which is a very low value, and especially when it comes to firefighters or any volunteer organization, Mr. Speaker, if the province had to pay for those, and the budget is having a hard job now to show a surplus, because from what I understand, this balanced budget that we are here discussing, the government borrowed money to balance that very budget, Mr. Speaker. And I commented earlier also that borrowing to balance a budget, I'm wondering where the balance actually is. Mr. Speaker, I would like to also again highlight the assessment on the Wreck Cove generating station, a $150 million plus project that was built in the 1970s and is presently a state-of-the-art facility that has an assessed value of $640,000, which is grossly underassessed, and therefore lack of funds coming to the municipality of Victoria County. And Mr. Speaker, Victoria the Lakes encompasses a large area of Cape Breton Regional Municipality also. And I cite the one in Wreck Cove because if that's underassessed to such a degree, if they say you shouldn't assume anything, but at the same time, if that's underassessed into such a state-of-the-art facility, it's easy to feel that Pointe-Coney generating station and Lingan generating station could also be underassessed, Mr. Speaker. Therefore, the municipality of CBRM not getting the amount of funding that it should from these facilities. Jake brakes. I'm getting worn out from mentioning the word Jake brakes, Mr. Speaker. The Honourable Minister of Transportation has heard me mention it. I see some signs going up, hopefully as a result of my lobbying, but Mr. Speaker, the signs are going up because they are entering a 50-kilometer zone speed limit where it is legal. But the area that I keep harping on, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Ambrose Lewis, who is kind of the point person for the area off of the 125 going up the French Vale Road. He lives on the corner of the French Vale and Beachmont Road. And maybe that's not actually in French Vale, it's Balls Creek. But himself and Gordy McKinnon, very vocal people and wanting the noise to stop. They live in a rural area. The area is only 0.7 of a kilometer long from where the gravel pits come down on the Beachmont Road to get on the 125. And if the minister would see fit to lower that speed limit from 70 kilometers an hour to 50, then they could legally put up the signs. But Mr. Speaker, I'd like this government to make a decision and to stand up and for the peace and quiet and harmony of that community to lower the speed limit or put up the signs and leave it at 70, whatever they prefer, Mr. Speaker, but do something. Lower the speed limit to 50, make it legal, put up the signs. I've tendered or submitted pictures of these signs that are in the areas out on the highways in British Columbia, and they work very well out there. So, Mr. Speaker, why we can't make a decision here, I don't know. The last excuse I received was that there was a pilot project going on in the Halifax area to measure how many decibels the noise was creating. But unless you're there on a permanent basis like residents, people deserve to sleep sometime during a 24-hour period. And right now, with construction going on and coming into the busy season, and the truckers have to make a living. So let's not call down the truckers. Let's defend the workers. But people, there has to be a compromise. And if the Jake brakes were disallowed, then the truckers could truck their gravel 24 hours a day, 7 days a week like they're doing. But at the same time, the people could sleep, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I have to reiterate again, Bert McDonald on the Scotch Lake Road asking for years to have that road paved. It's a K-class road, the total responsibility of the province. And as he said, he was told in the 1960s, way back to the 60s, that was on a priority list. The 1980s, he was absolutely guaranteed that it was on a priority list to be paved. And Mr. Speaker, nothing has been done to date. And I've given that to the Honourable Minister. And Mr. Speaker, I noticed the Honourable Minister of Energy released some roads that were being paved. The roads in my area were put on a priority list. And so I don't feel very confident with them being put on a priority list when I read that somebody's had their on the list since the 60s and 80s. And hopefully, Mr. Speaker, that somebody will do some of those roads that are on the priority list. I've just spoken just today with Marie McDonald from Long Island Road, and she lives on a road that is a very neglected road, I must say. Potholes that I personally bottomed out in the bottom of my car, and wheel ruts, potholes, and total fractures that you just can't even do the speed limit. And as I say, you must break the law in order to travel on these roads. You either straddle the road or go from lane to lane to try and duck them, Mr. Speaker. And we're all aware that there is a lot required for the roads, but I fail to see the analogy of a balanced budget and the Department of Transportation saying that they're $3.1 billion behind and looking forward to $4.4 billion by the year 2011. So, Mr. Speaker, I don't know what can be done about this other than the fact that I think that there's somewhere along the line there's a lot of mismanagement, there's missed opportunities, and there's underachievement a lot of times, Mr. Speaker, and I think that can and should be corrected. I had received calls from up in the Wagmacook area, the Humes River East Loop, the rear East Loop, and something that they've been looking for to have paved. And I hear that from the area manager, Mr. McDonald, Charles McDonald, that it's on the priority list. Kelly Lane in Ingonish, Mr. Speaker, doesn't qualify as a department road, although a lot of people live on it, and the department doesn't bring the roads up to standard anymore. But I'm working with the construction company that's going to put the water line in, and what they're planning on doing is using the fill that they will excavate when they're putting the water line in to make a better entrance from the paved road into Kelly Lane for the benefit of the people, because there's a sheer drop-off when you leave the pavement to go into Kelly Lane, and therefore in the wintertime you have to come out, and before you stop you must be out in the first lane of traffic. If you stop on the hill coming up, you can't get back out on the road. So, Mr. Speaker, those are some of the concerns that I have in my area. And to go back to the planning for the highways, I mean, the residents of Pugwash, I entered a petition on their behalf. You heard me bring up in the House here the Como Road was 4 weeks with the culvert collapsed, and the gentleman in the picture standing up to his waist in a hole. And I'm sure that although the weight restrictions were on, in an emergency situation like that, and the department could easily have accessed that without breaking their own rules of the weight restrictions on the highway. Mr. Speaker, down in my area again, the road to Washabuck, I call it the road to Washout, and it's in a tremendous state. It needs repair. I don't know what's going to be done with that, but they're deteriorated, as Mr. Charles McDonald and Barb Bailey both told me, area managers, that in a lot of situations the subgrade of the road is gone, and it really needs a lot of construction, and therefore to patch it is useless. It's a waste of money. I referred to the song, the truck driver's song there recently when I spoke in the House, 6 days on the road. Well, Mr. Speaker, I would say the operative line for that song should read 6 days on the road and I can't make it home tonight simply because of the road situation. Mr. Speaker, what does the cost of roads have to do with education? Unnecessary damage to school buses that are transporting the students to and from school, Mr. Speaker. The education system is costly, and rather than add more cost to it, if the roads were repaired, it would cut down on the damage to the school buses that must travel on all roads in basically any and all weather. And the unnecessary damage is, of course, causing unnecessary cost, which is coming out of the school budgets. So, Mr. Speaker, repairs to the road would actually improve the bottom line of the Department of Education. So everything is all interconnected. I'd like to talk about the motive fuel tax, Mr. Speaker. You've heard me mention that the diesel price in Ontario is 70 cents a litre, 95 in Waikagama, and $1.18 in Bay St. Lawrence. For the year 2001-2002, the actual motor fuel tax revenue figure for the fiscal year was $207,950,550. So $207 million, almost 208, Mr. Speaker, is a very substantive amount of money to gain from the fuel tax. And I would hope that this is all going into the roads, as I hear the Honourable Minister of Transportation say that it is. But, and these are figures from the public accounts, Mr. Speaker, that were garnered for this piece of literature that I have in front of me by a lady by the name of Ruth Blades. She's a researcher for the Greater Halifax Partnership, and I would like to give her credit for that because it's a very informative document to have, Mr. Speaker. It seems, and I've said to you before, and it sounds like a lot of repetition, but 75% of the calls to my office have been and still continue to be about roads. Mr. Speaker, letters to the editor by the Nova Scotia Chamber of Commerce, and this appeared in the Victoria Standard, which is the bi-weekly newspaper that we get in Victoria, the Lakes Riding. And it says priorities should be set for road work. Our secondary routes are atrocious, and business operators from Yarmouth to Sydney are sounding the alarm, said Nova Scotia Chamber of Commerce President Alistair MacLeod. Now, that's the overseeing body of all the chambers of commerce in Nova Scotia. We're getting constant complaints from business operators along the Eastern Shore, the Glooscap Trail, the Cabot Trail, the South Shore, and the Valley. He says, if the province doesn't take this seriously, we can kiss our most important business links goodbye. So, Mr. Speaker, I'm not the only one talking about the bad situation of the roads and how it is affecting our economy and how it affects the budget that we have before us today. And, Mr. Speaker, as I said, I was receiving unsolicited pictures of roads, potholes, letters to the same, people complaining about driving on the Nova Scotia roads, and as I said in my own article, that I must break the law each and every time I travel to and from Halifax in order to prevent my vehicle from being destroyed any more than it already is. And, Mr. Speaker, roads are an economic development tool for any part of the province. That leads me into and I'm glad to see the Honourable Minister here of Energy, because I'm going to quote from an article on Saturday, April the 2nd, in the Cape Breton Post, where the Honourable Minister of Energy, the Honourable Minister of Tourism and Culture is there, and the gentleman who owns the Inverie Inn, Mr. Scott McCauley. And it says the heading says the Cabot Trail look-off set for facelift thanks to government funding. Well, Mr. Speaker, $400,000 is a significant investment, to quote the Honourable Minister of Tourism, and he acknowledges how strong we feel as a province about the role of the Cabot Trail in tourism. But the problem is, Mr. Speaker, and he says one of the things the visitor is looking for is the scenic natural landscape, and if they can't see the natural landscape, then they're not getting the full experience. Mr. Speaker, traveling the Cabot Trail right now is worse than the full meal deal, because it's the best off-road experience that you can get if you're not driving in the park area. The park area, you could use rollerblades and skate through on the highways and enjoy yourself. Come out of the park, Mr. Speaker, and you're taking your life into your hands. Mr. Speaker, I've met with the department on several occasions, and one of the problems that I have, and maybe the Executive Director of Highway Operations can get this moved along a little quicker, but there's a temporary workplace traffic control manual, and that was decided they would change that back in 2003. Then it got pushed to 2004, then it got pushed to 2005, and now it's another definite 2006. But, Mr. Speaker, what this is doing is taking a considerable amount of time on behalf of the Department of Transportation to do their job effectively. And, Mr. Speaker, we have good workers, good committed workers with the Department of Transportation, experienced workers, competent workers. But what's happening is, without this temporary workplace traffic control manual being approved, it's taking them an hour to follow the present rules and regulations under the Department of Labor to close down a lane, take 5 minutes to repair the pothole, and another hour, Mr. Speaker, to open the lane back up again. And what this is doing it's unnecessary time that these workers cannot do their job. I mean, there's a lot. When you lose 2 hours to do a 5-minute job, Mr. Speaker, there's a lot of inefficiency that is blamed on the workers, whereas it's actually the fault of the Department of Labour for not coming up with the manual and having it approved. Because after it's approved, then there's going to be a need for a training session. Mr. Speaker, I want to quote again from the Cape Breton Post, March the 19th, where the Chamber focuses on the road, and the honourable gentleman again is Alistair MacLeod. A lot of tourists come around the Cabot Trail and express great appreciation, but they won't be coming back because the roads are so deplorable. The road system is a serious handicap to doing business, and so much of our business involves tourism. That's just a small quote from the large article in that. Mr. Speaker, it seems the same message is continuing to come from each and every corner of the province. People fighting to have their roads repaired, yet at the same time they're all paying the same amount of taxes. And I must say, Mr. Speaker, that drivers in rural areas seem to pay, or they don't seem to, they actually pay more road tax per capita than people in the urban area, because a tank full of gas is not one day's driving for people in the rural area. Mr. Speaker, I'm going to quote Michelle Rogers from Riverside Road near Stewiacke, who on April the 2nd in the Herald called it a pothole province. And she said her husband travels extensively in the eastern seaboard of the U.S., and many times he has heard the comment from our neighbors to the south, "Oh, we love your province, but the roads are terrible." And as she says, I'm not saying we should ever want to go back to a dirt road, but at the least a gravel portion sees a grader from time to time. So, Mr. Speaker, it's not one area of the province, it's all over. And here we are with deteriorating roads rife in the West, they riles the West Branch residents. Mr. Speaker, this is in Pictou, and there's a gentleman by the name of Troy Webb who, with the Department of Transportation, he's an area manager, and he's saying that the department produced a document to improve results when the department is competing within government for funding. So the department is competing within government for funding. Mr. Speaker, it appears that there's a pecking order even in the Tory government itself for who gets what. And what I'd like to quote is some figures from some of the 2003 figures that were released as of December the 30th. And it showed Digby, they received $1.5 million in funding for their pavement. Lunenburg, $5 million. Hants County, $18 million. So it appears, Mr. Speaker, that it just depends upon who's got the most clout and where. And I hope the Honourable Minister, with all my requests to him, will see fit to loosen the purse strings a little bit for Victoria the Lakes and come across with a bit of paving for the residents of my area. Mr. Speaker, again, Pictou County's Highway 256 Improvement Committee. The residents are even making improvement committees in order to lobby for some road work. Local residents are frustrated and angry. On Tuesday, March the 15th, a meeting of concerned local citizens, a committee was established with a mandate to find ways to urge the provincial government to repave Highway 256 from the Pictou County line through to Scottsburn and Lions Brook. Everybody, Mr. Speaker, is requesting, and requesting. Go back again to the budget that we're discussing. Power hikes could hurt the very poor. Every women's center coordinator. Mr. Speaker, there's the lady from the Every Woman's Center looking for a help because of the increase in power rates. It seems everything is going up, the cost of fuel, the cost of power rates, but Mr. Speaker, the service is not there, and the budget seems to be creating a hardship for anybody and everybody that's living in Nova Scotia. There again, the drivers demand fix for the crumbling road, the Pictou Road. Imagine, George Campbell of West Branch told a public meeting, "We're better off driving on dirt roads. I wish you could just rip it up and leave it to gravel." Now, Mr. Speaker, there's something there that it's time that somebody's going to have to listen, Mr. Speaker. And it bears repetition, and that's what I'm doing here tonight. I'm repeating a lot of these things, hoping that somebody will do something about it. Mr. Speaker, I spoke about the lack of a plan, and I have numerous copies of the tenders that are being called, and I'm glad to see those tenders being called. But the problem with it is, Mr. Speaker, is the tenders are being called now. They're being awarded in the following month, and it all looks well and rosy, but you have construction companies that travel all through the winter months and up to the present time, not knowing what the future holds. It's indecision, it's poor planning, Mr. Speaker, it's mismanagement. If these tenders were put out in the fall, and these companies could tender in the fall and win their tender, they could go into the new year prepared to go to work as soon as the roads open, Mr. Speaker. When the roads open, it shows stability. The contractor can improve on their equipment. The workers know they're going back to work, Mr. Speaker. And the families can feel a little more comfort in spending some money that they ordinarily would have to hang on to because of the indecision of the lack of knowledge of knowing that they're not going to work, unless Dad may not be going back to work if the company doesn't get the tenders. And I look at the $2.3 million to help make it smoother for motorists to travel in Inverness County. And Mr. Speaker, and 2 projects on the Highway 105 on either side of Waikaga. But Mr. Speaker, that's not my riding, but guess what? I was the one who brought that up to the minister and also to Mr. Martin Delaney, the executive director. And of course, anything on the 105 would be cost shared, Mr. Speaker. So it's good that, as I told him, when we drive on that road, it appears that we're driving into a third world country when we're coming to and from Cape Breton back and forth each week. Mr. Speaker, you heard me talk about the word being pro-regressive, which is totally opposite. It doesn't. It's almost like trying to put 2 to 3 negatives together. But progressive means you're interested in going forward. This is supposed to be the progressive conservative party, and yet at the same time, pro means to go forward, and regressive is going backwards. And I'm pointing out again that it appears to me that this government is looking forward to going from $3.1 billion in deficit road construction, looking forward to 2011 when there'll be $4.4 billion in debt. And yet at the same time, this word balanced budget is floating on one side of my brain, and the other is saying, oh, gee, isn't it going to be great in 2011? We're going to own $4.4 billion, so we're going to go further in the hole. So that's a regressive step, but looking forward to doing to it is a proactive approach. So I guess pro-regressive is about the closest that I can come to try to comprehend what the solution is, because anybody that owes a bill. We've heard them talk about the Department of Community Services and people struggling to get along on $756 a month. Well, those people should be consulted on how to stretch their dollars and give advice to this government. Never mind asking the deputy minister what to do, because apparently what those deputy ministers' advice and those departments are giving is wrong. Ask some person with children scrounging and scraping to get by on that meager amount of money. And how do they go from one end of the month to the next month? And that would be a lesson quite learned, and maybe a lesson in economics that the province should follow, Mr. Speaker. And at the same time, I'd like to just touch for a moment, go back to education, because as I said the other evening, we have the student loan. There's a lot of calls coming into my office about student loans, and the problem with student loans, Mr. Speaker, here we have students being funded, working summer jobs for minimum wage, getting a student loan, going to college, and there are situations that I'm getting calls on now, Mr. Speaker, that what's happening is students are being funded for the first, second, and third, and some of them for the fourth year, and the bill is large. Some of them get through in 4 years. Some of them need a course or 2 or maybe 3. But, Mr. Speaker, I know of one particular case, a call that came into my office. The student has completed 4 years, and they need one more course. And it can't be taken in a summer course. They need 6 credits, a full year course, and they owe 4 years of student debt. But now the loan board has refused them. So where do they go from here? They can't get funding to go back to college for that final year to complete the degree. Without the degree, the student can't get a good paying job. So therefore, the student is now going to have to work for a minimum wage, try to live, and cannot pay the loan back. So it's ironic that somebody would be funded 99.9% and then not completed. Mr. Speaker, I printed off the May is Motorcycle Awareness Month that the Honourable Minister had released the other day there, saying that if there was 10,000 motorcycle users in the province, motorcycles are a popular form of recreation and transportation. And the Honourable Minister released that document, but it's rather ironic that he released that document the very day that the article appeared about Nova Scotia roads getting the thumbs down from the riders, the motorcycle riders who have write for the Thunder Press, which goes out to 120,000 Harley-Davidson enthusiasts all over North America. Now, Mr. Speaker, we're saying that this is a motorcycle month, and we have the Thunder Press saying every time you get on the bike to ride, it was a battle, it wasn't pleasant, and talking about the roads in Nova Scotia. So, Mr. Speaker, I wonder, when is somebody going to listen? When is somebody going to create a plan? And as I said, when any small community organization, they all have a plan of knowing where they're going to go in 5 years and where they definitely intend to be in 10, Mr. Speaker. And what's happening here is we don't know where we're going to be in 5 with road construction, but we know where we're going. Well, I guess we do know. It's not in 5, but in 6 years, we're going to be $4.4 billion in the hole. So, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to see a plan, a definite 5-year plan of road construction, and a proposal that would carry us through to 10 that could be flexible. And that way there, Mr. Speaker, we'd know where we're going and we'd have a plan on how we're going to get there. But the way it works, Mr. Speaker, it's old-fashioned politics. We've been starved for pavement in the areas that I represent and all around the province. But what's going to happen, it appears, with the plan for this year, Mr. Speaker, is that I'm going to probably advise the hitchhikers to be extremely cautious and to keep moving when they're on the highway, because if they stop to put their thumb out, Mr. Speaker, they risk the chance of being paved over, because when the paving truck is coming, you know the election truck is immediately behind it. And that's what it looks like, Mr. Speaker. And I'm looking at the be it resolved here that the sum not exceeding $263,954,000 be granted to the Lieutenant Governor to defray expenses in respect of the Department of Transportation. Well, Mr. Speaker, that's a lot of dollars, but at the same time, it's not what you have, it's how you use it. And that way there, if you use it diligently and properly, Mr. Speaker, then you can get a lot more bang for your buck. Now, Mr. Speaker, I could go on and on. I have a folder here that's another 3 inches thick, but I understand that some members of the NDP party would like to have the opportunity to address the Financial Measures Act. And, Mr. Speaker, in the vein of cooperation, I've consumed a fair amount of time, and I would like to relinquish what time I have left and turn it over to the NDP party so they can speak on the Financial Measures Act, Bill 177. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Recognize the Alma member for Dartmouth East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased to stand here tonight and talk for a while on the Financial Measures Act, Bill 177. When the minister stood up and spoke on what he thought was in this bill, I was listening. And I did write down a few of his comments. He did mention that there were some changes to the acts of the Nova Scotia legislature, and that this bill would implement some government plans, and that this bill was going to help children get in shape, stay in shape, and it was going to help out in the areas of recreation and sports activities, and that it was going to make the province more competitive and give us a better future for our children and our next generation. So what I'm going to try and do over the next few minutes is talk about some of those issues that I see in my community, and then look and see if this plan is really a plan that will do anything for families and people in Dartmouth East, Mr. Speaker. The government's plan, supposed plan, will implement a tax credit for children of, I believe, $15 per family. Well, if that's going to do, I don't know what that's going to do for recreational sports in my constituency, because as some of my honourable members are telling me from the sidelines, it won't even buy a hockey stick. And it's been a while since I've bought a hockey stick, because my kids are not in hockey any longer. So this $15 per family is only going to be available to those who qualify in the first place. And I don't think there's any facts or figures on how many people actually will or will not qualify for this, Mr. Speaker. So that's going to be left for us to find out, I guess, who's going to partake of this $15 tax credit. I know it won't buy a soccer uniform or a pair of a ball, soccer ball, what have you. The minister talks about helping children get in shape. Well, I think a good way for children in my community to get in shape would be moving towards building us a community center in Dartmouth East. I don't know if anyone here is aware of it, the fact that our area of the old city is the only area that does not have a community center. I mean, this is almost unbelievable, but it's true. And this community center, if built, and there is a society now working on that, and I'm involved with them, that meet regularly at 7:30 in the morning. I will tell people that, 7:30 in the morning, and so I can't make it to all the meetings. But this is a committed group of people in Dartmouth East and the surrounding area that have been working, I think, since 1982 to try and get a community center for Dartmouth East. And there's representatives from the Boys and Girls Club on that. We would like to give the Boys and Girls Club a permanent home in Dartmouth East. Right now, 250 children and youth are partaking of programs in Dartmouth East out of 5 different venues. And one of these is actually an outbuilding of a church in my constituency. And they make the best they can with this facility, but obviously it's not what a community center would offer, the Boys and Girls Club. And a new community center in Dartmouth East would recognize the recreational programs that are needed for our youth. And I know the government is very concerned about what's happening with our youth in Nova Scotia, and I don't see why they would not support this. Right now, there are approximately, well, there's a lot of families in Dartmouth East that would actually access this facility. The facility would address various needs. As I mentioned, a replacement facility for the Boys and Girls Club, which actually had burnt down, I'm not sure how many years ago, and I think they were promised, or there's always a promise on the table. It's the government's 4-year plan promise, I call it, the 4-year plan promise. Well, we'll promise you something, and then if you elect us, maybe you might get it. Anyway, this facility would address some concerns. We could do some community outreach there. We could offer up office space, maybe even a place to hold community-wide events. And definitely a community center would offer us a sense of pride and a place to gather in our community, which is lacking right now. And as mentioned in here the other day, I don't want to get off track, but I do have concerns about what's going on right now in all of Dartmouth and the outlying areas as far as high schools go, and whether or not this government is actually looking at Prince Andrew High School. And of course, Prince Andrew High School does offer up some recreational facilities, but these are not always accessible, and people cannot always access those or afford to. So a community center would contribute to also the cultural side of life and the social life of our community. We could hold wedding receptions there, and this would bring in some revenue. So these kinds of facilities are so very important to the youth in our community, and I can't stress that enough. The minister, going back to Bill 177, the minister does speak about, again, the Healthy Child Tax Credit. And what better way to provide a health promotion in your community but to provide that in the facility like a community center, where I know at the Dartmouth North Community Center they do provide a lot of health promotion activities there. We could, there's been talk about putting on nutritional programs so that single parents with young children or babies could access these and come in and be shown nutritional meals that they could make on their own and ways to shop for the best produce and these sorts of things, Mr. Speaker. A community center would also help in health promotion by, of course, providing physical activity. And we know that phys ed has been cut back in the school system, and that due to the lack of facilities in Dartmouth East, a lot of our youth don't have the money, Mr. Speaker, to travel outside of their own community to access recreational facilities. There is the Sportsplex in Dartmouth, and there's the Dartmouth Cole Harbour Place. But those places, you have to pay to use those facilities. And most of them, you're in an organized sport kind of gathering. So there's a lot of families in Dartmouth East that cannot afford to either access those facilities, pay the fees, or travel to get to those places. And, you know, really, what's happening in Dartmouth East is that people are going outside of our own community and taking their money and spending it in other parts of Dartmouth. And those are the people that can afford to do so. And then, as I said, there's folks that just can't afford to do that, and then they are stuck with really little choice. So again, on the health promotion side, we could provide healthy lifestyle choices and those sorts of things in a community center, so that we could address some of the things like poor nutritional habits. And also, we do know that there's an inadequate access to healthy food right now that a lot of people are facing. So we want to be able to provide a venue that could really help people with those issues in their life. So, Mr. Speaker, I don't think that $15 is really going to address what the minister thinks it's going to address. Some of the issues in the community, and of course right around Nova Scotia, one of the big issues, of course, is poverty. And we do know that poverty is a major factor affecting the health and well-being right now of people in Dartmouth East and across the whole province. Right now, people are struggling. I see them at my office. They come in, you know, we can barely keep up with it. And certainly we can't help people as fast as we would like to. And what happens is people try their hardest to really keep their head afloat of their bills and things that they need to purchase for their family. But what happens is, especially people on social assistance, they end up juggling bills. And they move things around, or they don't pay this and they don't pay that, because you know what? They want to feed their kids. What a surprise. They want to send their kids to school with books, scribblers, and now, as we all know, you have to come with your own Kleenex to get into this school system. They have to pay for child care, and they have transportation issues. So when they come to our office, they've been trying to struggle and juggle with all these issues, and we're their last resort because they have tried to go to the government for help. And as I said earlier today, MLA offices are like satellite offices government satellite offices. Social service offices, whatever you want to call it. One of the things I would like to mention is talking about poverty, and one of the things I noticed in this budget and was a breakfast program for younger children. But I'm wondering what the government's going to do in regards to, breakfast programs for teens and youth, because we all know that that's an issue too. And if young children are going to school hungry, teenagers are going to school hungry too. So I'm just wondering if anyone has had a chance to question whichever department is responsible for that, because food is expensive. You go to these high schools and the cafeterias aren't giving the food away, and that is an issue. Mr. Speaker, issues in our community that are youth-related some of them are access to health services and a lack of accessible facilities. As I mentioned, not being able to access facilities because they're not in your neighborhood, not being able to join various clubs, hockey teams, or soccer teams. And because of the decline in physical activity in school, these things are so important. And I think, we need to pay attention to what's going on with youth right now. I think I heard the other day that the next generation is going to be the first generation to have a shorter lifespan than their parents, and that's pretty sad. So I think our youth, we have to address these health issues that they have right now. And one of the solutions to that I don't think Bill 177 addresses is that a community center would offer a place for youth to gather both day and night and access some of these health issue facilities or programs. There was, I believe last summer we had a problem with some graffiti in Dartmouth East, and maybe that's a sign of we need somewhere where we can keep our youth busy and active and doing productive and interesting things in a community center. And Mr. Speaker, they're our future, and we have to give them a place to go that's safe and healthy. A community center would actually offer a venue for us as adults to interact with our youth. And this was actually an idea that came forward through the Dartmouth Community Health Board's one of their community meetings that they had, and it was actually a youth forum. And that's what that was one of their ideas, that they wanted to be able to meet with us and talk with us in groups. And they really wanted to interact with adults in their community, because they do have a lot of great ideas, and I think we're missing out on a lot of their ideas by not having a place to really get together with them in our community. In Bill 177, the minister says that he is going to make this province more competitive. One of the ways I guess he's planning on doing that is by giving our large corporations a tax break. But I have to wonder, because although I have a small percentage of small businesses in Dartmouth East, I think it's less than 1%. There's not a lot. They are important to Dartmouth East, and they, Mr. Speaker, they support our communities. I can't say enough. I mean, as an MLA, and I know everyone here will agree with me, you're probably at an auction at least once a week, either supporting a school, a church, or what have you. And these auctions are supported by our businesses in our community. They donate the items, and certainly mums and dads, relatives donate items also. But why is this government not helping our small businesses either grow in Nova Scotia or promoting some new businesses to open? Because these are the people that the majority of them are probably, born in Nova Scotia. They want to stay here. Their kids are here. They'd like their kids to stay here. They want to have a small business, have their children work in the business, hand that down to their children, and they don't want to see their kids have to move away and take jobs, not just in other provinces, but in other parts of the world, which we do see happen a lot. These small businesses are the people that have a real caring for the province, and they do add to our economy. So, Mr. Speaker, I can't say, I can't talk talk enough about the government's actions recently. And their actions, I think, do speak louder than their words, because as we know, this government would not help a very long-running family business called Sneers. Apparently, this business did not have a good enough business plan. Apparently, PEI had no problem with their business plan because they opened them they welcomed them with open arms. But you have to wonder, don't you? Bill 177 doesn't help small businesses with their rising insurance rates. I have a constituent that last year was telling me that he has a small fleet of vehicles, and his insurance went from $11,000 a year to $33,000. Now, I don't know how a small business is supposed to keep afloat, because they're probably operating on a small line of profit. And is this a way to keep small business in Nova Scotia, or a way to drive them out? And, you know, I think sometimes small businesses, the only reason they stay here is because their family is here. I would doubt that a lot of, you know, small businesses look at Nova Scotia and say, hey, let's go there. Let's, you know, open up a satellite office there. Let's go there. Let's start a small business in Nova Scotia. Because why would you? What's the incentive to start a small business here when you look and say, well, they drove Sneers right out of the province to PEI. And when you've got a small business here that their insurance rate has tripled in a year, how are they supposed to stay afloat? Are they going to pass that cost on to their employees? Are they going to make them take a loss in their pay? What are they going to do? So, as far as a plan for a better future, I don't believe I see that. This government is continuing to give breaks to large corporations and insurance companies. I don't see these breaks going to families or small businesses. And at one community meeting I had some people coming in to tell me what some of the issues were that they were facing in Dartmouth East. And one of them was that there is an issue with nonprofits not being able to meet the cost of their insurance coverage. I mean, we know that these nonprofit groups are continuously fundraising, and I think, you know, it's sad when you stand here and actually hear the Minister of Community Services sort of insinuating that maybe these nonprofits should just get out and do some more fundraising, like as if that's an easy thing to do. I wonder if he's ever ran a spring fair or done anything like that, or ever had to work 6 months straight in a year to fundraise and make $6,000, or to get the volunteers behind him to help him do that. So, you know, those resources that go into raising the money to pay for the added cost of insurance could have went to help the people that these nonprofit groups were actually trying to help, or are trying to help. And these groups will continue to fundraise. They're not going to just close the door on the people they're trying to help. But it would be nice if the government tried to give them a helping hand. Mr. Speaker, Bill 177 doesn't address some seniors' issues that I know about in Dartmouth East, and I'm sure are very common around the province. Seniors in my area have talked to me about problems in being able to upgrade their homes. They've got problems with government grants on upgrading their windows, their roofs, chimneys, various things that they need help with to stay in their homes. I've had people that have been turned down for help from the government to convert their home so that their son, who has become physically disabled, so that they could build a ramp and refurbish a washroom. And these people were told that you're just, I think they were like $2,000 above the line of income that you would need. So, you know, there's no gray area with this government. It's black and white, and nobody gets anything, I guess, that, you know, the government thinks they shouldn't get. Seniors talk to me about wanting to stay with their families, and that's whether they're staying with their sons or daughters, because they don't want to go into long-term care facilities unless they absolutely have to. And the government is really not helping these people stay in their own homes, which I believe is more cost effective. Seniors are having a problem meeting the higher cost of drugs. And we all know this, if you've ever canvassed during an election, this is one of the things that people will tell you, that they actually are not taking the medication that they should be. Or if the doctor wants to put them on a different kind that's perhaps has a better result but is more expensive, they have to turn this down, Mr. Speaker. That's just not right. Seniors are not taking their medications because, guess what? They want to eat too. What another surprise. Can you imagine seniors that want to eat? I mean, Mr. Speaker, this bill does not address health issues. It doesn't address long wait times in our emergency rooms or in our hospital. It doesn't address seniors waiting in emergency rooms for not just hours, but days before they even get upstairs into a room. And I cannot say enough about the staff that work in our hospitals. And this is from personal experience, and they are fabulous people. I actually spent one of the best weeks of my life, not that long ago, on the 4th floor of the Dartmouth General Hospital. And the staff on that floor and what they do for the people there, and I'm not just talking about the nurses and such, but I'm talking about the people that deliver the meals, the cleaning staff. These are fabulous people.
Order, please. Because of the hour, the honourable member would like to move adjournment debate, please.
I certainly will, Mr. Speaker.
Motion to adjourn debate on Bill 177. Agreed? Great. Calling the honourable member co-harvester passage on tomorrow's hours and order of business, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Tomorrow the House will sit from 2 p.m. until 6 p.m. and after the order, well, if you want to sit longer. And the hours after the daily routine, we will be calling bills number 36, which is the Medicare Protection Act, and bill number 194, Cape Breton Strip Mines Moratorium Act, Mr. Speaker, and I move adjournment of the House.
Motion is the House adjourned to 2 p.m. tomorrow. Is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Contrary-minded nay. Motion is carried. The House adjourned to 2 p.m. tomorrow.